Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to our Sunday meeting, and today's topic for discussion is earth-shattering. It is so important that I cannot understand why this has not been discussed every day over the last few hundred years. And the topic is, can a woman travel alone? And I'm sure if you gathered here today come to the conclusion that a woman can't travel on her own, then Rifat and Fokia and Bano and all these women will go upstairs and lock themselves up in their rooms and stop going out on their own. Sometimes people ask why Muslims are not making progress. Well, perhaps this might serve as an example of why Muslims are not making progress. But as it came up on our WhatsApp group, we thought we might discuss it. So it's going to be, I think Fokia is going to speak in favor of women should go out alone, and Zahid is going to speak against and says women shouldn't go out alone. And we'll start with a comment by Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi, who was asked by one of his followers whether he should allow his wife to study geography. And he said, "Are you mad? If she studies geography, she'll find out how to get from A to B without asking, without seeking your permission." So, but unfortunately these days, they don't have to ask you, they just get their sat-nav out or their mobile phone out on which they've downloaded Waze or many other things, and off they go. So who's going to speak first, Fokia or Zahid?
Okay, go on.
Okay, so first Fokia.
Where should it be?
Anywhere where.
Okay.
Yes, carry on.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, my sisters and brothers and children. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As Shahid Bhai has mentioned, that today's topic is about travel. Without travel, we can't survive these days, or at any time really. But as time goes on, travel is getting easier and easier and easier. Even to the extent that we can buy a ticket to go to the moon or in the space. They've just sent one 2 days ago, I think, an unmanned flight that you may be able to buy a ticket and travel, and women and men are permitted to do that. How we came to the conclusion of doing this talk is by, there is a member of our Jamaat, I wouldn't call her a sister because she's much younger than me, I can call her my beti, Iram Ahmed, who said something about traveling in Islam, and she quoted one hadith of our Prophet, and somebody sent her some information about it, so she put it on our WhatsApp group. So after reading that, a kind of a discussion started between a lot of people, And I'm just going to mention a few of those that how it started off. The hadith that she quoted was that the Prophet Muhammad said, quote, "A woman is not to travel except with a mahram," unquote. And it's been discussed. I have heard people talking about it in different places, and never sort of looked at it deeply, that what really is behind all this. And very kindly, Zahid found some references, and other people found references that we then came to a conclusion that I think we need to learn and hear about it. After Iram sent this message, she said that in olden days, journey was very difficult and people couldn't travel very far without any help. And then she quoted this hadith. And she also said that that women are not allowed to travel alone at any time. They always have to be accompanied by a mahram. Then another member of our Jamaat, Ross Magenti, commented and said, "I don't think there is any injunction in the Holy Quran or any hadith forbidding women traveling alone." And then he also mentioned that the reason why this discussion was maybe at that time started was that traveling was very difficult and it was safeguarding people. That was the most important thing in that. There is nothing else for men and for women. It is the safeguarding of people when they are traveling. And protecting oneself from, and Ross Bhai says that in protecting people and for protecting oneself from all forbidden things, this must be done at all times, whether traveling or not. And then Shahid Bhai mentioned something. He said, "A Maulvi told me that women need to stay at home so that the men don't look at them with evil intent." And then, as Shahid Bhai quite often says things in a very humorous manner, he said, "I suggested men staying home when women went out would achieve the same objective." And he said, that is stupid. Can one explain why it is stupid? Why? But if men can go, women can not go out, but men can go out. And the only reason women should stay at home that men don't think of evil things when they are out, which is kind of a ridiculous argument. And then Dr. Zahid Aziz, my lovely husband, said something about it, which I will mention later on. And we also talked about that our mothers, grandmothers, Shahid Bhai mentioned that our grandmother and mother traveled alone from Lahore to New Delhi, which is quite a distance. And she was the wife and daughter of Maulana Abdul Haq Vidyarthi. And he says that I should think that he knew Islam more than these guys. And I think Iram is saying that, yes, I need to learn more about it. Ross Bhai says that this is a foolproof guide for what should be done if one want peace of mind and protection for the women in your life. It doesn't mean it's the only way. It was more relevant in that time. In this day and age, the mahram has been replaced by the police, which is part of the state. It has changed. We have all kinds of protections around us. And Shahid Bhai says that Ross Bhai, you have too much common sense. It could be the result of being a Lahori Ahmadi. And we thank Allah that we belong to that Jamaat. And we have people amongst us who put us right. And Shahid says, now we know why it is called foolproof. Ross Bhai says to Zahid, thank you, dear Zahid. It is by the grace of Allah, lucky are us all to believe in the greatest Mujaddid who came till the end of time. He also mentioned in one of Farooqi Sahib was a very eminent member of our Jamaat. He says that it is permitted for women to go about their business and jobs without mahram or husbands. The only condition is that they dress modestly, not over-covered, and no letterbox type hijab needed in their daily struggle to earn a living, and the men folk are ordered to lower their gaze. And Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali Sahib has argued in his magnificent commentary of the Holy Quran that women can dispense with the dupatta when in the kitchen or near machinery in the world of today. And Shahid Bhai then also mentioned that which is common sense. At one time, many women were burnt when the dupatta caught fire. I noticed that most women now dispense with it in their home and only put it on if a stranger comes to open the door. And when I read that, I thought of my mother. My mother always hated wearing a dupatta. And she said, oh, I could never keep it on my head and it slips off. And she would come home and the first thing she took off was her dupatta. And in 1996, Zahid reminded me of this, in Ohio, she was giving a public speech. And during it, her dupatta came off. And some people said to others that go and tell her to put her dupatta on. So the thing is that people put too much emphasis sometimes on things that are really not that important. So we prepared this talk for you to listen and then give your comments about. We will look at hadith in Sahih Bukhari in which the Holy Prophet is reported to have said, quote, a woman should not travel except with a mahram. This is in Bukhari, hadith number 1862. Mahram of a woman is her husband and her own very close male relatives, so close that she cannot marry them, such as her father, her brother, or her sons. Just two hadiths later, in hadith 1864, four things are mentioned. Two of them are relevant to our topic, and these are, one, quote, no woman should travel without her husband or without a mahram for a 2-day journey. And another one says, a journey should not be undertaken except to the mosques, except to 3 mosques, Masjid al-Haram, my masjid, and Masjid al-Aqsa. By my masjid, he means the masjid in Medina. The second instruction applies to all Muslims, men or women. These are also found in other hadith books, such as Sahih Muslim. In other places in Bukhari, there is a group of 3 hadiths from 1086 to 1088. We read there, quote, a woman should not travel for more than 3 days except with a mahram. Another one is, it is not permissible for a woman who believes in Allah and the last day to travel for 1 day and night except with a mahram. Now we notice that there are 4 different versions of this instruction about a woman traveling without a mahram or her husband. accompanying her. The first is she cannot travel at all. She can travel for up to 1 day and night. The third is she can travel for 2 days. The fourth is she can travel for 3 days. What occurs to me in this, could it be that the Holy Prophet was giving different advice to different people according to their circumstances, and so he set different time limits? Or could it be that he gradually increased the length of time because travel was becoming safer? The limit of 1, 2, or 3 days don't affect a woman who goes to work every day and comes home. In fact, these days, any place in the world can be reached in less than 3 days from where else in the world to anywhere else in the world. So if a woman has close relatives at the place where she starts from, for instance, at Heathrow Airport, and also at a destination, it means she can travel alone to any place in the world, even within these time limits. Think now of days of the Holy Prophet and traveling for more than 1 day at a time. One needed supplies with you, money, and you needed to know how to find the way. Didn't have sat-navs. I get lost even with a sat-nav, and my husband says you need a camera in the car so that I know where you are, so I can tell you what to do. So those things were not present at that time. Would it be possible for a woman to do that alone? In those days, the most trustworthy companion who could also help her with the difficulties of the journey would be her husband, some close relative. Even today, in the most advanced countries of the world, women are warned to avoid traveling alone through certain places at certain times. The Holy Prophet said in another hadith in Bukhari, quote, "Journey is a kind of torment," and we all know that. "It deprives you of eating, drinking, and sleeping. When a person on a journey completes his work, he should make haste in returning to his home," unquote. So as we know that when a journey starts, excitedly we go to places, and then at the end of a journey we are getting home and we are feeling relaxed that we've got home safely. Maulana Muhammad Ali, in his Urdu translation of Bukhari, writes this note under one of the hadiths quoted at the beginning of this talk. He writes, quote, "In Hadith 1860, just above, it has been reported that Umar allowed the wives of the Holy Prophet to travel to Hajj, accompanied by men who were not mahram to them. No one objected to this action by Umar, nor did the wives of the Holy Prophet refuse to go with them. This shows that a woman can travel even longer distance without a mahram. All that it amounts to is that if there is safety for a woman, she can travel on her own. Again, it depends on the nature of the journey. Different hadith reports mention different lengths of journeys which a woman should not undertake without a mahram. It is 1 day in Hadith 1088, 2 days in Hadith 1864, and 3 days in Hadith 1086. A journey shorter than this can be undertaken without a mahram. It is also agreed that a woman can travel with other women. All this shows that if there is safety in a journey for a woman, she can travel without a mahram, or otherwise a mahram is required. Unquote. That was Maulana Muhammad Ali's explanation. So that is the explanation given by Maulana Muhammad Ali. Now let us turn to the following hadith mentioned in the beginning. Quote, "A journey should not be undertaken except to 3 mosques. Masjid al-Haram, my masjid, and Masjid al-Aqsa, unquote. This hadith applies to both men and women. It occurs alongside the one which says, no woman should travel without her husband or without a mahram for a 2-day journey, unquote. It is impossible to take this literally. How can a Muslim, man or a woman, not undertake any journey whatsoever except to these mosques in Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem? So Muslim scholars had to interpret it in some other way. One interpretation is that the journey it is talking about is when you undertake a special journey to visit a sacred place, believing that you are going to a holy place, blessed by Allah. It is warning to Muslims that to treat other mosques and shrines and tombs as if they are places of pilgrimage, like these 3 mosques are. You may ask, what about when you undertake special journey to attend our annual gathering in Lahore? People who go there don't consider it as a place which in itself is sacred. At one time, people went to Ahmadiyya building in the center of Lahore for this annual gathering, but since past 45 years, they go to Darussalam in another area of Lahore. So it is not physical place which they consider sacred, but it is the aim and objective of objects of the gathering which they go for. In explanation of this hadith, there is an article in the form of a fatwa at the website www.islamqa.info. It says that it is not allowed for Muslims, quote, to visit places that are regarded as holy in other religions, unquote. It also says that it is not permissible for a Muslim to visit a non-Muslim country, except for reasons like, quote, traveling for medical treatment that is not available in a Muslim country, or traveling to study something that is not available in a Muslim country, or traveling for business purposes. This article also says, as for traveling for tourism, meaning to non-Muslim countries, that is not permissible because the Muslim has no need for that. That is the quote that they are suggesting. As you can see, the restrictions mentioned in this article are impractical, even ridiculous and damaging. This is why you don't see Muslims obeying them. When Hazrat Mirza Sahib instituted the annual gathering of his followers at Qadian, a Maulvi published a fatwa to say that going to such a gathering was prohibited in Islam because the Muslim is not allowed to travel anywhere except to the 3 mosques as mentioned in Hadith. Hazrat Mirza Sahib wrote in his reply, I quote, "Every Muslim ought to pray that God rid Islam of these Maulvis who show such treachery. For this is a critical time for Islam, and these foolish friends wish to make Islam a target of ridicule and mockery by making statements which every person with his light of reason find to be untrue," unquote. The entire reply given by Hazrat Mirza Sahib to this Maulvi is worth reading. So just as we cannot take literally this hadith that a Muslim cannot undertake a journey except to these 3 mosques, we also cannot take literally these hadiths about a woman being allowed to go on a journey, not allowed to go on a journey without a mahram if the journey is longer than a certain number of days. Turning to the Quran, such restrictions are not found anywhere in what we find in the Quran are the following examples. Abraham, under divine command, let his wife and infant in the wilderness, which is now Makkah. If it says in the hadith in Bukhari, quote, during those days there was nobody in Makkah, nor was there any water, unquote. This comment shows that her being in Makkah was just like being on a journey. It happened sometime later that the people of a tribe passed by. After asking permission from Abraham's wife, they settled there. Who was the mahram present with his wife, either before or after these people settled there? She had no mahram there, and all this happened under the command of God. The story of Mary, the mother of Jesus, is given in Quran. It says that when she became pregnant with Jesus, she went to, quote, a remote place, unquote. The famous Muslim scholar Maulana Maududi writes under that verse as follows, quote, she left all her relatives and went alone to a distant place to give birth, unquote. So Maulana Maududi confirms that no mahram went with her. Mary received revelation from Allah during this journey, but Allah did not advise her against going on this journey without a mahram. Going back to Bukhari, we find that it contains a prophecy made by the Holy Prophet, which helps greatly in solving this issue. Someone by the name of Adi ibn Hatim says that a man came to the Holy Prophet and complained about highway robberies taking place, making traveling unsafe. The Holy Prophet said to Adi, quote, have you been to Al-Hira, unquote. Al-Hira was a city in Iraq and was under the Persian Empire during the life of the Holy Prophet, but was conquered by Muslims shortly after his death. Adi replied that he had only heard of this city. The Holy Prophet said, quote, if you should live for a long time, you will certainly see that a woman in a hoda traveling from Al-Hira will perform the tawaf of the Kaaba, fearing none but Allah, unquote. I should explain that hoda is a carriage, like a little enclosure or a booth placed on a camel's back to carry people. Adi says that when he heard this from the Holy Prophet, the thought came to his mind, quote, what will happen to the robbers of the tribe of Tai, that was Hatam Tai, who have spread evil throughout the country, unquote. Then Adi goes on to say that he saw his prophecy fulfilled many years later. He says, quote, I saw a woman in a hoda traveling from Al-Hira till she performed the tawaf of the Kaaba, fearing none but Allah, unquote. These words, quote, fearing none but Allah, unquote, mean that there was no danger from anyone that she faced in her journey alone, as the country had become that safe. The distance from Al-Hira to Makkah is 1,000 miles. So this journey was more than 1 month long. In the end, I would make this important point of principle. If understanding statements made in hadith, we cannot make general rule based on looking at just one hadith, we have to consider other hadiths as well that are relevant, and then see what conclusions all of these put together lead us to. And most importantly, we must see whether the Quran supports or contradicts the conclusion we are drawing from the hadith. So I end my talk here, and I hope we all understand that traveling, the most enjoyable thing I think I can say in my life, if that was not allowed, then I wouldn't be who I am. I have left Pakistan to come and live in this country. Luckily, I came with all of them. But my sister got married, went to New Zealand all alone, never sat in a plane in her life. So we have examples of people who have traveled. My husband's mother, having 2 children and a husband, left them in Pakistan, went all the way to America to study all alone. So I think it's not the journey we are talking about, it's what people are going to do. If we are going to do good things, they are enjoyable, we learn things from them, and we teach people who we have met in that journey. I feel I am a better person for living in UK, experiencing the variety, than the diversity of people, and so many different cultures that I would not have been exposed to when I lived in Pakistan. So all those things were mentioned only for the safeguard of people, I would say. It doesn't require to be said a man or a woman. I think both can be exposed to danger. And as Iram said, maybe men are more in need of a mahram than a woman because they are more inclined to get into mischief than women would. So I would agree with her on saying that. I wish she was here. Pardon? Well, she's in Pakistan, so she's traveling alone. Her husband is sitting here. Her son is sitting here. So she is traveling alone. So an example that yes, you can do that. So I'll end it here and ask if Zahid had anything else to add at this stage. Thank you.
Oh, I'm pressing the wrong thing. I won't add anything, but I'll just summarize the whole treatment, how we treated this topic. And it arose from the question which someone asked, that in Hadith in Bukhari, it says a woman should not travel except with a mahram. And mahram, we've explained, is either a woman's husband or, well, a woman's husband, and in addition, very close male relatives, for example, father, brothers or sons. So that's what one hadith in Bukhari says. And what we pointed out here is that whereas that hadith simply says should not travel except with a mahram, in the same Bukhari, in other places it says a woman shouldn't travel without a mahram for a 2-day journey, and also that a woman should not travel for more than 3 days. So what we have to ask is, why are there are these 4 different lengths of time mentioned, that she can't travel at all? She can travel for up to 1 day, 1 night, for up to 2 days, for up to 3 days. And also that other hadith that applying to, which doesn't apply only to women, which says a journey should not be undertaken except to 3 mosques. Masjid-e-Haram, the one in Mecca, my masjid, that is Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina, and Masjid al-Aqsa, the one in Jerusalem. That occurs along with the one about women traveling. So first of all, we see what we can learn, you see, from the fact that there are different time limits mentioned. That already shows that either these have not been transmitted as they were because people are differing about what they say, or also that the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam may have mentioned different time limits to different individuals in different circumstances, or you could conjecture that maybe at first he said a woman shouldn't travel at all, then he said for 1 day, 1 night, then 2 days, then 3 days, because circumstances were changing. But of course we don't know which time order he said these things in. And the next point we made was that if you actually look at this limit, then it doesn't actually affect anyone practically, any woman practically, because you can go to work and come back, and that's actually within a period of about 12 or 14 hours. And also, I think you'll find this to be true, that you can go from any place in the world, more or less, to any other place in the world in well under 3 days. I think you'd probably find it in a half of that time, but certainly within 3 days. So that wouldn't affect a woman where she started off was with her family and where she ended was with her family. And in fact, one of our relatives has done this and reached Australia from UK door to door, taking about 36 hours. So practically that doesn't seem to matter. A journey to the moon, by the way, is also 3 days. The ones in the late 1970s. But you see, when we were on holiday in Marrakesh last August, we took a trip in the desert where they drove us for several hours, first of all, in a minibus to a point after which you could either go by camel to this camp in the desert, taking nearly an hour, or you could go on this sort of Land Rover type vehicle, taking 6 to 7 minutes. So you can guess which one I chose.
And I sadly sat on the camel, and for 1 hour.
But many of us, many others, went on a camel, and they were in that party 3 camels, and then the camel driver who walked leading the camels. So if you imagine that that's how you are going to travel, you see, in those days, for a start, how do you know which direction to go in? There are no signposts, there are no roads. And so people, they were specialists like trackers who led the way. Now maybe someone might not trust his wife going with a tracker whom he doesn't know. That situation could arise. And for a woman or even a man to go alone, you'd have to plan, wouldn't you, where you were going to stop. You'd have supplies with you and money. You wouldn't have any cards that if they're lost, you phone and they're cancelled. You would actually have real money or gold coins with you. So that would be very risky, which might be why the Holy Prophet mentioned those limits for women. And then there's in more or less the same place, the hadith in Bukhari, where the Holy Prophet said that a journey, a safar, is a kind of torment which he calls azab. That, of course, many commuters in this country will instantly agree anyway that a journey is a kind of torment. It deprives you of eating, drinking, and sleeping. So the Holy Prophet ﷺ says that when a person goes on a journey, he should try to return home as soon as possible. So that was what we pointed out, that when there is these conflicting with each other, then you ask the question, why is that? And you don't take one of them as specifying some fixed rule. And these other hadiths, which seems very strange, that no journey should be undertaken except to 3 mosques. It says that in an unconditional and absolute way. So obviously, people from the beginning of Islam had been trying to explain this, because Muslims were traveling everywhere for all sorts of purposes. Meeting relatives, for example, who weren't living in these mosques. So they said, well, where it says a journey shouldn't be undertaken except to these 3 mosques, what is meant is a pilgrimage kind of special journey where you believe that your destination holds some sort of blessing from Allah for you. It means that such a journey should only be undertaken to one of these 3 mosques. And in that way it makes sense, because we know that Muslims in that way go to all sorts of places for seeking spiritual blessings. They go to tombs of saints and other mosques, shrines, and other historical mosques. So what the Holy Prophet ﷺ meant was that a pilgrimage type journey should only be undertaken where you believe the destination to be sacred, to these mosques. And then it occurred to us, well, people could say that you go for the annual Jalsa to Lahore and you believe that it's spiritually blessed and you will gain something spiritual from being there. But you see, people don't consider the place they are going to in Lahore as in itself sacred, in the way in which the Kaaba is a permanently sacred place, or Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina, or Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, because we used to go to Ahmadiyya buildings in the center of Lahore. Before the split, you went to Qadian for the annual Jalsa. Then members of our Jamaat started going to Ahmadiyya buildings till the mid-1970s. And since then, they've been going to Darus Salam, the Darus Salam Mosque, which is in another area of Lahore. So they are not thinking that there is a physical place there that we'll be gaining anything from. What you will be gaining spiritually from is that gathering of people, that congregation. And therefore that so-called fatwa on Islam QA, that stands for Islam Question Answer, islamqa.info, is very strange and in fact ridiculous. That, for example, to say that a Muslim can only go to a non-Muslim country to get either medical treatment not available in a Muslim country, or to study something you can't study in a Muslim country. But the third thing is interesting, or traveling for business purposes. Now, I don't want to attack anyone's intention, but maybe we know how fatwas are bought, don't we? Maybe some businessman said, and add here, except for business purposes. So, to please those rich people. After all, if they didn't put that in, then all these rich, wealthy people from Saudi Arabia, for example, wouldn't be able to come here. So I don't know whether that's been added extra. And astonishing, isn't it, that when Hazrat Mirza Sahab originally instituted the annual gathering at Qadian, as it was then, a Maulvi published a fatwa giving that hadith, saying it's not permitted for people to go there, for Muslims to go to that Jalsa, because this hadith says you can only go to these 3 mosques. And Hazrat Mirza Sahab then replied to it. His reply is published. And I once translated many years ago a large part of it, which is available. But when I read the original one again, of course I didn't translate the whole of it. And the whole of it is worth reading, because he then explains the importance of traveling in Islam. He mentions in it that there's these that seeking of knowledge is an obligation on every Muslim man and woman, and the other famous one that gain knowledge even if you have to go to China for it. And then he says that, yes, he says for all sorts of things, like for those expeditions or meeting your relatives. And he says, and to see the wonders of the world. Traveling is allowed to see the wonders of the world. And then he says, addressing that Maulvi about some other great Maulvi who was opposed to Hazrat Mirza Sahib, that you even traveled to his walima. And that was into one of these three mosques. And then he says this, you see, that such people are khain to Islam. Khain, that is to say, they're stabbing it in the back. They are being treacherous to Islam because this is a critical time for Islam. And these foolish friends are just inviting ridicule and mockery on Islam by making such statements. And also the Maulvi had objected that you can't fix a date for something in Islam. He said, Mirza Sahib has said, come on these 3 dates. But that is a bid'at. There are people who say that this sort of thing is a bid'at. And Hazrat Mirza Sahib says that a bid'at, an innovation, is something that is against and opposed to the teachings of Islam or the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet. And he says, if you look at the time of the Holy Prophet and immediately after him, the state had to be organized. The Holy Prophet himself fixed times for meetings for people to see him. And then he mentions all the things which Hazrat Umar did. And he says there's no sign or trace anywhere in the Quran or the Holy Prophet's teachings that those things should be done, which were involved in the organization of the state. And then he says having a police service and having all sorts of detailed laws to govern the relationship between people. And he then goes on to say that new circumstances require new ways of doing things. And he says, for example, following what the Maulvi has said, even the use of modern weapons of war would be forbidden to Muslims, because he says that would be a bid'at or innovation. And also it says in Hadith that you can't kill someone by burning them with fire. And he goes on to say that if Muslim rulers started acting on this, then the few broken down kingdoms that they've got left, they would lose even those. So he's gone on there to say that, as he says, in new circumstances, new things are required. And this has been so since the beginning of Islam, because I don't think he makes this point. Even the Quran wasn't written down. So you'd say writing the Quran in book form and reading it, that's a bid'at. And certainly writing Hadith and in book form, that would be clearly one of these innovation or bid'at. And lastly, there might be other examples, but first of all, the Holy Quran doesn't mention these restrictions on women traveling. But if you look at those 2 examples, that Abraham leaves his wife and infant in the wilderness, and Hadith tells us during those days there was nobody in Makkah, nor was there any water. So which madam is he leaving her with? And then that same long Hadith says that a tribe happened to pass by, and they saw some birds flying over, and they realized that there was water there. But because by this time that well of Zamzam had been opened up, because this angel showed Hagar where it was. So it says in that Hadith that the tribe asked Abraham's wife's permission, can we settle here? And she said yes, providing that providing that you only use this well, you don't own it. You only use it. On that basis, you can settle there. Now, these are complete strangers. So now Abraham's wife and infant are with complete strangers, and there's no relative of any kind present. And this is under divine guidance. And the other example, that of Mary, the mother of Jesus, that according to the Holy Quran, after becoming pregnant with Jesus, she went to a remote place to give birth where there was no one. And so Allah had to guide her about shaking this tree to have dates fall on her, and also where the water was available under her. And even Mawla Madudi writes under that verse, she left all her relatives and went alone to a distant place to give birth. So Allah is himself telling his most righteous women, like in Abraham's wife, or in this case Mary, to undertake such journeys where alone, where there was no so-called mahram available. And lastly, in Bukhari itself, there is that prophecy of the Holy Prophet. In fact, it contains more than one. One man complained about poverty, and the Holy Prophet ﷺ prophesied that one day you will have so much wealth that there will be no one needing to receive it. And one man came and complained about robbery on the roads, on the routes between cities. And the Holy Prophet said to Adi, who was watching this, that have you been to Al-Hira? And Adi said, well, I've heard of this place. I haven't been there. Al-Hira it's a place near Kufa in Iraq. And it only came under Muslim rule just after the death of the Holy Prophet. And the Holy Prophet then made this prophecy that if you live long, you will see that a woman in a hoda is they had these in this country as well. They were called sedan chairs. So on the back of an animal, there is this little cabin, and a woman or people get into it. And no. You'll see a woman traveling from Al-Hira and performing the tawaf of the Kaaba, fearing none but Allah. And then this hadith tells us that years later, this hadith says, when I heard this, I started wondering, well, there are these well-known robbers of the tribe of Tai. Where will they be then? What will have happened to them? But anyhow, many years later, he says he actually saw this. It was a prophecy of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and he found it literally coming true, that a woman in a hoda traveled from Al-Hira till she performed the tawaf, fearing none but Allah. And I had to go to, first of all, I had to find out where Al-Hira was, because I don't think it exists under that name now. And then using Google Maps, I found that it's almost exactly 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers from Mecca. So doing maybe 30 miles a day is the most you could do. This would be quite a bit over 1 month long, this journey, which a woman actually did according to prophecy of the Holy Prophet. He didn't prophesy that women will become wayward so much that they will be traveling alone to go to the Hajj. He said the country will be so safe. So, as I said, the conclusion is that you shouldn't jump to some wrong conclusion by seeing one particular saying or hadith and take it out of context. So that is all that I wanted to say. Then just say at the end that may Allah accept our presentation. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. So I'll finish with that.
Thank you, Zahid and Fokia. There are a number of things we should remember. Did you realize that each one of us committed a criminal offense this morning? Didn't know that, did you? According to English law, every Sunday after church we are supposed to practice 2 hours of archery. And if we don't, then that is a criminal offense for which we can be sent to prison.
That's still part of the law.
That's still part of the law. But Inshal can check that, as he's, my knowledge is
laws not repealed.
Laws not repealed. Another law is that any woman married to a servant of the crown, if she uses makeup, then one ground of divorce can be that she is a painted woman and a harlot. Now, I would suggest that someone actually tries to divorce his wife, some civil servant or someone.
That applies nowadays. Men wear makeup as well.
Well, the law only applies to women.
So that the law should have a male version of it.
Yes. But my point is this, that even laws, when they remain on statute, when they become irrelevant, no one takes any notice of them. I mean, Met Police are not going to raid this place and arrest us and say, prove to us you did 2 hours of archery this morning, So the law has to be relevant to the needs of the people. If it's not, people just ignore it. And this is what Zahid was saying about, you're not allowed to travel. Well, how are you going to get to work? How are you going to, do business and so on? And the other thing is the context. There was a case where the government was passing a law, and we asked the late Lord Avery. The law was this, that if anyone makes a wrong statement on their visa application, not only will the visa application be refused, they'll be banned from applying for 10 years. So we asked Lord Avery to take this up in the House of Lords. So he wrote to the immigration minister, who wrote back and said that this is only meant to apply to those people who deliberately try and evade immigration control, and not to people who make innocent mistakes. And I've used that loads of times to say this was the context of the law. He did not he wasn't trying to evade immigration control. It was an innocent mistake. Example, a guy was asked at Gatwick, how many children do you have? And he said 5 or 6 or something. He was from Antigua or something. And then when he applied to join his wife, he was asked, how many children are living with you? And he said 3. So his visa application was refused. Either you lied then or you are lying now. And I said, well, he's not lying. One guy asked him how many kids he's got. The other one's asking how many kids are living with him. So both are correct, and he was allowed to come in. So, this context is very important. One man went to the Holy Prophet and said, what's the greatest virtue? The Holy Prophet said, saying your prayers on time. Another one went to the Holy Prophet and said, what's the greatest virtue? And the Holy Prophet said, being generous. And another one said something, a hadith, etc. And a very, very important thing that we always forget, again, I refer to Inshal here, when particularly higher courts, Supreme Court and the High Court, they issue a judgment, there are two parts to it. One is the principles, and the other is application to an individual case that they're discussing. Now, circumstances change. For example, I mean, my favorite example in this case is a man went to the Holy Prophet and said, "O Prophet of Allah, I want to give all my property in charity when I die." And the Holy Prophet said, "No, don't." And he said, "What about 3/4? What about half?" And when he came to 1/3, the Holy Prophet said, "Yes, that's okay." And then the Holy Prophet went on to say, "It is not virtuous that you leave your own children in need and leave all your money to others." Now, this is the principle. What do people do? The Holy Prophet said 1/3, you can't do more than 1/3. The question I asked is this: if Bill Gates says, "I'm only leaving 10% to my children," is he depriving his kids? I should think 10% of his total wealth would probably be $1 billion. So we forget what the principle is that the Holy Prophet is trying to explain. And we grab on the detail. The Holy Prophet said 1/3. And that 1/3 related to that man in his circumstances. I mean, if someone only has £6,000 and he leaves 2,000, he gives away 2,000 to charity and only 4,000 to his kids. Do you think he's depriving his kids? I would suggest he is. He's only got 6 grand, and 2 of that he's leaving to charity. But again, as I said, if Bill Gates says, I want to give 90%, and he's still not depriving. So this is what we should.
He is leaving even less.
He's leaving even less. In his lifetime, he said, "I educated them. They don't have any education loan to pay off. I bought them houses." And I think, did he give them $10 million each or something? Something like that. And said, "That's all you're going to get now, go and earn a living. It's up to you whether you want to gamble it all in Las Vegas or whatever you want to do with it, but that's it." But the point is, he's still not deprived them because they've got no education loan. He bought them a house. He's given them $10 million. You can hardly call them deprived. But the point is, we forget about, and all these things, don't travel and do this. There was a principle. What was the principle? Safety and security. When that is established, then there is no need for that. Otherwise, why give different injunctions about, don't travel for more than a day or 2 days?
People still say that, and I've heard people say that.
Yes, I know. I mean, that's the point I'm making, that people just take literally the detail of something small and forget about the principle that the Holy Prophet... I mean, in that case, what about the hadith that a woman will travel on her own 1,000 miles and she'll fear no one but Allah? I mean, what about that? And this is that sad thing, and I see this in many things. I mean, and this is what I keep on saying. I'm now just beginning to understand why the Holy Prophet said, read the Holy Quran every day. I'm just now, at 71 years old, beginning to understand that one sentence. Because every time you come across something and you say, my God, I never noticed that. We have this big debate about whether a non-prophet can have more knowledge than a prophet and so on and so forth. Those of you who heard the Friday khutbah, I came across this verse of the Holy Quran. Prophet Moses says to a non-prophet, and I will obey you and I will follow you and I will not question you. This is Moses, the man who brought the law, the man who took Israelites out of Egypt and so on. He's saying to a non-prophet, And eventually the non-prophet tells him to go away. You disobeyed me. So go away, I don't want anything to do with you. And yet we have these great big discussions and debates because we've left the principles. And there is, yeah, Mustaq.
So coming back to the topic about the hadith about traveling women, we had cases recently in the UK whereby this cab driver, this black cab driver in London, were drugging women, traveling in his cab with champagne.
That's
and
right.
he was a predator and he went to prison for it.
Yeah.
So the principle of safety wasn't established then.
Yeah, that's right.
So
exactly.
So in some ways, the hadith still applies.
In some, yes.
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 And,
Yes.
and we have to take it with a pinch of salt in our interpretation of it.
Yes.
Because these things still happen.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
This is why we
Exactly.
said in that presentation that even at the present time in the most advanced of countries, women are advised not to travel alone through certain places at certain times.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's right. I mean, last year when I was going away, I contacted various authorities and so on, and everyone said, don't go. It's not safe. So, there are still places in the world where it's not safe for men to travel or women. So, those things apply. As I started off by saying, these things are applicable where there is a need. And I mean, I'll give you one example where I think, Britain and America and places like that are really silly. We were in Dubai, and this train came, my wife and I, and we got on a compartment. And then 2 minutes later, this police person came and said to me, "What are you doing?" I'm sitting here. What do you mean, what are you doing? Yeah, why are you in this compartment? And I was puzzled. That it was female only. But in London, on underground, you're used to the train just coming and you just get on. And I said, well, my wife and I, we were trying to get from wherever it was. And as soon as I mentioned the fact that my wife was with me, the policeman sort of calmed down. And he then explained, this is a women-only compartment and go and sit over there, etc., etc. Now, in Britain, we have, men and women travel together. And then we have the transport police. And then we have the videos. And then we have this, and then we have that. And, I commuted into London for nearly, a quarter of a century. And the number of incidents that I saw of women being molested and harassed by men, I could write several novels. I mean, all they did was, when the next station came, they just got off and went into another compartment or whatever. Isn't it simple like Dubai? Just have a separate women-only compartment where these things can't happen? And sometimes, sorry?
I just say that the thing is that women are exposed wherever they are. It's up to them to safeguard their security and their well-being.
Yes,
not being sort of
that is true as well. Yeah. I mean, that applies to everything. If my house was burgled and they said, "Did you lock the door?" I said, "Well, no, because no one should go into my house." They'd say, "Well, yes, they shouldn't, but they do. This is why you lock the door." So the same thing applies, to women, that, they should also make sure that, their physical security and so on are not compromised, etc.
I think I agree with Brother Mushtaq that where you can have a chaperone, why not? If a husband's there or a brother's there or somebody, then that's a good idea. But where you decide on individual basis, you look at the journey, you look at the risks involved,
that's
and then you make a decision.
That's right.
And
exactly.
then you leave it to Allah, and then we all have to, I think, we have to show our character as good Muslims, whether we're a man or a woman. And if the men behaved nicely, then the woman won't be at risk.
Yeah. That's
And obviously,
right.
if the woman does want to behave not in a nice manner, then whether there's a chaperone or no chaperone, then it's a different situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so I think it is something like you said. You have to interpret it into your situation,
Yeah.
and there should be laws and safeguarding. I mean, they have. I think in this country they've adopted them more than Pakistan.
Yes.
Because I know for a fact that when there are children traveling to school who are of unsound mind or minors, they always, the council arranges a chaperone.
A chaperone
to be
for-
in that cab,
Yeah.
along with the driver. The driver is an adult,
That's right. That's
which
right.
is vetted by the council,
That's
who's
right.
had his CRB checked. It's a good reputation.
Yeah.
Taking children from A to B, but then they appoint a chaperone, a lady usually,
that's right.
sit in the cab to look after the children. So,
Yeah.
not saying the law is here and every day is a CCTV, but they still make sure.
Yes.
And I think so.
That's right.
To as far as we can, it would be a good idea not to promote that women just go out on their own and start traveling the world, which is a good idea. But if they're traveling, like you said, to a space and there is a journey involved, they can do it on their own.
Yeah,
I don't think there's
that's
any
right. That's right. And that is the whole point about these ahadith of the Holy Prophet. You know, guidance for physical safety and security. That is being, taken out of context and, taken to extremes and so on.
Yes, there's also
So-
the question that if the need arises, you see.
Yes, exactly.
Because the way people take it is that it's an absolute.
Absolutely. Exactly. Exactly.
And also, aren't your patients have the right to have a chaperone, don't they?
We always, absolutely. It's written on the walls.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I always verbally offer them as well.
Most GPs
Obviously,
do.
with sensitive examinations, you must.
Yes.
But even with non-sensitive examination, you offer them a chaperone.
Mm.
And then they say no, and I have to document it.
That's right.
Chaperone offered declined.
Decline.
Because if I haven't written it, I haven't done it.
Yep.
So the law, Shahid Bhai will tell us that if somebody looks back at the notes and
Yep.
I haven't documented it, I haven't done it.
Yep,
Basically.
that's right.
That's how the law looks.
That's how it is. Yes. That's sorry.
In a manner of speaking, if you look closely at the Quran itself, it talks about this, but not in direct words as we are saying. In chapter 24, verse 13, 31, when it says, and say to the believing men and to the believing women, lower your gaze.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right.
Obviously, if you're inside your house, you don't need to lower your gaze all your life, do you?
Exactly.
But it means you're going to go out into the world,
Yeah.
see or meet or have to converse and talk with people.
That's right.
And this is how you should do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see,
That's
and
right.
that
Yeah.
comes in the same surah just after mentioning that incident of Hazrat Aisha,
Mm.
where she was left behind and someone
In the
was
desert,
told
yeah.
her, and then people started rumor mongering.
Yes.
But having mentioned that in the Quran gives a sensible precaution, doesn't it? It doesn't say, so now your wives are not allowed to travel by themselves in case this happens.
Mm.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And then we'll end with this, and then it's time for Asr. That people have misused these injunctions. I think it was in 1930s that ulama in India announced that it was kufr to live in India, because India is Darul Haram, it's the land of the unbelievers, so everyone must migrate. And so thousands of thousands, tens of thousands of Muslims, they sold up their houses, they sold up their businesses, and they tried to migrate mostly to Afghanistan. And when they got the border, what did the Afghans say? These brother Muslims are coming over. Did they welcome them with open arms? Did they kiss them? Did they have camps with counselors telling them where to go and settle down? No. They told them to go away. This is our country. You are foreigners. You're not coming in here. So they had to go back. And lots of people lost everything. Their houses, their businesses, their livelihood and so on.
That's why Hazrat Mirza
So-
Sahib prayed that may Allah get rid of these Maulanas.
Yes. Because, that is the kind of thing that they did, and they're still doing.
And then also Maulana Maududi and his party issued this guidance for Muslims living in independent India after partition, that they shouldn't accept any government job.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's in the Munir report.
Yep. Yep.
That they'll be working then for a non-Muslim government. So, I mean, that's so much to their detriment.
Well, I mean, Maulana Maududi actually gave a fatwa saying anyone who leaves a Muslim majority land is not entitled to inherit anything from his parents. And the favorite thing that Maulanas always have, his nikah is now terminated. I mean, this poor old nikah must be the weakest thing in Islam, gets terminated. You know, if the sun is shining and it should be raining, nikah gets terminated. And something else as well. But I mean, you know, these are sort of foolish fatwas, to put it mildly, that, you know, if you go to this country or that country, this will happen. Let us assume that Islam says, don't go and live in a country where non-Muslims are in a majority or form the government. How many people have obeyed that law? People have offered me £10,000 in Muslim majority Pakistan to smuggle their kids into this, you know, den of heathens that we live in. So, you know, this makes a nonsense of the law. It then makes a nonsense of religion itself. And people say, you know, how can a religion teach anything like
Isn't
that?
it said that, you know, they accept part of the Quran and don't accept the other part of the
Yes,
Quran?
yeah,
And again that, and third thing, you know, it's an interpretation thing. It says in the Holy Quran about Makkah that they will come from far-flung, remote parts
Parts
of
of-
the lean camels.
Yeah.
That's right.
So if you don't have to, you know, start looking for camels, we know what it meant. It meant the people will come from far corners of the
Yeah.
world
Yeah.
on airplanes as they come now.
Yes.
So again, it's the interpretation thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, the Holy Quran says, I asked a Maulvi this, and he was all about, you know, jihad and, you know, following the Quran, and said, Maulvi Sahib, you know, you support a government that clearly violates the dictates of the Holy Quran. So he said, no, how do they do that? And I said, well, the Holy Quran says, have strong horses ready at the border to defend your country against the unbelievers. So I said, how many millions of horses has the Pakistan government got to defend itself against non-Muslims? I said, why have you got an atom bomb? Why have you got tanks? Why have you got planes? And he, well, if this means, well, I said, well, if this means, then I can say about other things that they mean that as well, not what suits you. Okay. Time for Asr is slipping, so, and I'm getting thirsty and I want a cup of tea anyways. I thank everyone for joining us. I hope you found the discussion interesting. And until we meet again on Friday, I pray that Allah keeps all of you safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum. Khuda Hafiz, goodbye. I want to remind people, please, we've got 3 ladies of our Jamaat who are very ill, to pray for them. One is in India, one in Fiji, and one in San Francisco. So, for various reasons, I'm not giving their names. But please do say earnest prayers, particularly our sister in, Fokia says, perhaps I should say daughter, in India. She has young children still to bring up and put through school and college and so on. So her parents are extremely worried and upset, and she may be seriously ill. They found a lump, but they don't know whether it's cancerous or benign as yet. So please pray for Allah to have mercy on all of them. As I said, Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, goodbye.